Turner is very happy to be a participant in this tall building conference on tall, twisted, tapered, I think I saw the word tortured yesterday, and that might be appropriate in some cases, towers. And I think we have a real good resume of projects that we have completed over our 104 years of history. We have participated in something like 13 or 14 of what are the world's tallest buildings today. And among those is Taipei 101, which is currently the world's tallest building. And just to give a little bit of a comparative, we're doing Burj Dubai, which is a tower that will rise over 800 meters. That is nearly 300 meters taller than what is today the world's tallest building. And I'll tell you, if you want to really grasp just how much of a difference that is, stand on the 97th level of Taipei 101, look up and think of adding 300 meters, or the equivalent of 3 good tiki bar or rushing outings for the New York football Giants. And you get a sense as to just what that means. It's just mind-boggling. If you take a look at a part of our portfolio of tall buildings today, you'll see how they continue to grow in height. They continue to grow in architectural complexity. Mechanical and electrical systems are more sophisticated. Bottom line is they're much more demanding than what we've put in place in the past. Just quickly take you through it, and there's a reason for that. In Kuwait City, Al Hamra Tower will reach 415 meters. Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, almost 300 meters of financial tower. Burj Dubai, which we hear about over and over again with real good reason, 800 meters. Federation Complex, which when completed will be the tallest building in Europe. The tall building is 90 stories in height, and it's 357 meters. The Doha Convention Center, 550 meters height. And Paseo de la Bahia in Panama City, Panama, 350 meters. So you look at so many of these tall buildings that are being built, and what you notice is that they're being built in emerging markets. And that does create some complications for us, or at least, if not complications, let's call them challenges to all of us. And I think that one way of starting this off is to read an excerpt from a letter that I received from project manager. It was a letter that has an attachment included his note to the structural engineer. I will not divulge the name of the tower. Maybe you can guess it's one of the buildings that are up there. So he writes to the structural engineer and he says that for the past year we have expressed our growing concern that the structural design of Project X, as you describe it, one of the world's most sophisticated structural designs in the world, is most likely not executable in location Y at this time, with the unpredictability of the supply of materials, the lack of understanding of technology, the lack of the available and properly trained and experienced workforce. In a note to me, he put, Nick, Project Y is a challenge in its geometry, being three-sided, curved, tapered, which raises so many issues of cost and constructability. Curved and tapered means lack of standardization in concrete forming, reinforcing steel layouts, MEP layouts, and most importantly, the facade system. Facade curtain wall system varies with every floor, raises serious cost and quality issues. The perimeter concrete columns are set back from the building edge so that they must shift inward as the building rises, since they cannot remain plumb in the same plane as the building tapers. I'm getting to the payoff. This requires very careful and precise layout surveys for each floor, which has not occurred in Project X because the client selected the lowest and, in his mind, non-qualified bidder. So we find ourselves tackling buildings that are taller, they're more sophisticated, they are more complex. We're doing them in emerging markets where you don't necessarily have the experience base that you might do a building, same building in Chicago or in New York or possibly in London or in so many places in Germany, Charlotte, where you have worked. It's a different set of challenges. These buildings would be challenging in places where there is a great experience base, and we're building in places where, in some cases, there is no experience base to do buildings like this. So if we look at some of the challenges, I'll talk about development expertise. And this is not a real criticism of so many of the developers who are undertaking some of these very challenging projects. It's just that they simply don't have the same level of expertise that we have developed by being tortured by so many of these buildings that we have worked on in our past. I use this one example, our tower in Vietnam. And we have a developer who has, to his experience days, a couple of 20-story residential towers. And he's taking on something that is considerably more difficult. And I quizzed him about it, and one of our own staff, one of our in-house philosophers, said to me that, well, Nick, you have to realize that spring lambs do not fear the tiger. This is Dan Su, and I guess it's an Eastern saying, proverb, but I guess what it's meant to say is that so many of these developers that are moving into these very, very difficult projects do not know what they don't know yet. And if they understood what so many of the challenges were, maybe we wouldn't be working on as many of the towers that we have today. When you look at a tower such as this, and so many that we work on, you don't have the same level of market analysis that we like to see before we go ahead and do a large program like this. Financial feasibility, to me, is often less than adequate, only to protect the developer and the people who are investing in projects like this. The level of expertise in project development, for so much of what takes place at the front end of a large program, is just not there. What does this mean to us? It means that ourselves as construction managers, yourselves as architects and engineers, play a much expanded role. We find ourselves operating upstream in the development process, and we need to be prepared to do that. We need to be prepared to protect many of those spring lambs from those tigers that are out there. And sometimes that means telling them things that they don't necessarily want to hear about how long it might take or how much it might cost to build out their building. And you need to have connectivity between a financial analysis and a budget for a building. When we took a look at this building, we found that if you look at the construction cost, what we know it will cost to build that building, and you compare it to the financial feasibility study, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And the owner's stated purpose of building this is for profit. So it was back to the drawing board. A lot of money had been spent, a lot of engineering put in place, and we had to redesign the project. We went from a steel tower to a concrete tower. We took the tower down several levels in height and made a number of other changes that reduced the cost of this by almost $25 million. Had we been involved earlier, maybe we wouldn't have had to make so many of the changes that were required in order to get the project back to where it made sense to build. So we have a lot of work to do at the front end to help so many of these spring lambs deal with the tigers, such as cost control. Standards and codes. Moscow. And there's a considerable amount of work taking place in Moscow today. If you go back 4, 5, 6 weeks in the Sunday section of the New York Times Magazine, there's a great article on this project and on the developer. A company called Mirax, run by a fellow named Sergei Polanski. And we're trying to move through this particular project. And while there aren't standards and codes for high-rise buildings in Moscow, it's not enough to say that, okay, we'll build to a New York code, or we'll build to a UK code. Well, you can say that, and they will accept that in concept. So many of the different regulatory authorities that we have to work with have no, again, experience based in dealing with these high buildings and can't make the connection to those codes that are U.S. codes. What does that mean for us? It means that we have to engage so many of these regulatory authorities as early as possible. It was just yesterday an individual asked me, when do you think it's time to go to the regulatory authority in a particular place? I said, you can't get there too soon. You cannot engage them too early. We're required to go in early to understand what they understand, to understand what they will be looking for, and to work with them every step of that process so that we don't have torturous approval processes later. On this particular project, you can't do spray on fireproofing because it's unknown in Moscow. And it means a lot of extra cost for this particular client. and it means more time in this project. If we had gone earlier in to see certain of the authorities, we might have convinced them that this is an application that has been tried, it's true, it works, something we might have changed. Teams, architectural teams, engineering teams, construction management teams need to be multicultural, multilingual, so that we understand what processes take place in so many of these emerging markets where we currently do business. Bitch, I thought I was going to talk about construction. Right? Resources. Panama, 90 stories. How many contractors in the country of Panama or in the region have built 90-story buildings? There's not a lot of expertise. And if you say, well, we'll bring in someone from offshore, someone from Korea or Japan, the United States, even if you can get a U.S. contractor to take the risk of building a building like this, to take on the cost and time liabilities, they reach out to the local marketplace, to the trades, suppliers, and so much else that you need. And you have to understand, we have to understand, that the experience base is not there. So we have to make it as simple as we can in order to put some of these projects together. When you talk about resources, the thing that scares me is resources that are available to the Turner Company. I'm glad to see so many students here, and I hope we see an uptick in the numbers of students that are interested in engineering degrees. Because I can tell you that when I am asked, what is the single constraint facing Turner in doing more work outside of the United States, and it's all about people. We just simply cannot find the people who are qualified and in the numbers that are necessary to take on so much of the work that is out there. And the work is becoming more complicated, and there's a lot more of it. Towers are sprouting up everywhere. Everyone wants to build the next world's tallest building, or at least something that goes 100 stories. Under 100 stories, they don't seem to be all that interested. So we need to find a way to, and it's not just Turner, but it's many of the companies like Turner, do a better job of attracting good people, training good people, retaining good people. When I say environmental issues, I'm not speaking to green, but that could be another whole subject area. I could spend an entire day speaking to energy conservation, building sustainable buildings, which we are very, very active in this Turner. But I look at some of the places where we do our business. We'll engineer it here in the United States or in the UK or other locales, but we build them in Taipei, where there are severe seismic requirements, subject to, I guess we would call it Category 5 typhoons. We're building in a place where they have absolutely horrific soil conditions. Or we might be in Riyadh, where it was almost 3 weeks straight we had temperatures in excess of 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and we didn't miss a day of placing concrete. Or we might be back in Moscow, where last year we had several weeks of minus 20, minus 25 degree Fahrenheit weather. It's not easy. And again, we have to plan for it. Now, one construction-related curtain wall, and I can't tell you this, how critical curtain wall is today in the early planning as to how to put a building together. As these buildings get taller and more complicated and more twisted and tapered, one of the critical elements, maybe the most critical element, is the wall. What happens when curtain wall contractors go belly up is you see a project like this, which we're certainly not happy with. And we talk a lot about the Burge Tower, and it's a great job, and it will come in on time, but there's not a lick of curtain wall on that building, and it's not tolerable. A curtain wall contractor went belly up. And at a time when curtain walls are becoming more and more sophisticated, we're finding fewer and fewer companies in the marketplace providing the engineering and the fabrication of these very, very complex walls. Curtain wall contractors have got to be on the job almost day one. I'll go back to those developers who don't have the level of experience that they should have in doing some of these towers, and they think once they've tendered and have the foundation out or the structure out, they can sit back and take a break. I got to tell you that when you're tendering that structural package, you have to have your curtain wall contractor identified and on the jobs, the coordinations that go into these complex projects. By the way, I think we have a fix for this. A race like hell, get that wall to where it need be. Next year, one of us are up here from China, you'll see something substantially different. But I don't want to tell you that it's that easy. There are challenges that face us in working in so many emerging markets and in working on in some areas like the world of curtain wall, where challenges only grow as the projects grow more complex. Today we see a lot of curtain wall coming out of China. And while it is quite competitive in price, the engineering is not where it should be. So we find ourselves working to match US, European, engineering out of Hong Kong or Singapore with those fabricators, and trying to convince our clients and the contractors that you need to put somebody in those shops there from day one until the last lick of curtain wall is fabricated to watch the quality. Consistency in the quality of what's put out is just not acceptable in many cases, and it just means that we have to work a lot harder, disciplining the way we do our business. After all that, you might say, well, geez, that's not a very pretty picture. But it is. It's a great picture for us. And I don't want you to think that it's not a great industry, and we don't have a lot of fun doing it. Just want you to recognize the challenges, but look at the payoffs. I mean, for ourselves and for me personally, Emirates Towers is one of the great building projects. And I noticed, Hazel, are you here? Is Hazel Wong in the audience? I saw her here yesterday. Hazel, stand up, Hazel. Please. This is the architect for the Twin Towers in Dubai. And I tell you, I don't know how many people have been to see these buildings, but I put these buildings up against anything that you'll find anywhere in the world. And Hazel, I mean, always, you talk about architects and you think of you think of SOM, and you think of Helmut Jahn, and you think of so many of these large firms. Put a fabulous job on these two towers. And if you go to Dubai and you don't visit the Emirates Towers, you're really missing a fabulous piece of architecture. Taipei 101, fabulous job. The first tower in New York, Al Faisal for Norman Foster, over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Ishbank with Swanky Hayden Connell, which is today, if you consider, for those of you who consider that Istanbul is a part of Europe, or at least Western Istanbul, this is the tallest tower in Europe. So I thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of present today. I didn't want to speak strictly to construction matters. I wanted to just let you know some of the challenges that we face on a daily basis that we're all engaged in order to make some of these things a reality. I appreciate your time.